As you know, last year the EPA, along with the Corps of Engineers, issued a new rule without getting the input from local and state stakeholders that certainly expands the jurisdiction of the federal government over the waters of this country. Not just having jurisdiction over navigable waters like we see in the back here in the Missouri River, that makes sense, but also potentially bringing in jurisdiction over our ditches, farm ponds, local county roads, anything where possibly water during a heavy rain might gather that eventually might get into a creek, that eventually might get into a ditch, that eventually might get into a navigable water. And certainly this is very, very concerning. This violates the balance of power that has been working for years between federal jurisdiction, state and local jurisdiction to ensure Americans have a clean water supply. But it also potentially jeopardizes our farming operations and how county and local governments conduct their business as well. If you have to potentially get a permit just to be able to carry out your basic farming operations or to be able to clean a ditch if you're a local county government, and this is far beyond what the original intent of the Clean Water Act is. So Representative Lukenmeyer and myself and others have stood strong against this. Last week we introduced a bill along with the chairman of the Transportation Committee, Bill Schuster, that would first of all force the repeal of this rule, but then also require the EPA to work with local stakeholders and state officials to develop a new rule that makes sense, that makes sure that we keep that proper balance, that works, that doesn't overstep the bounds of the federal government. I was very pleased that last week, even though it was introduced on Monday, it was heard and passed out of committee on Wednesday. So we are very serious about passing this. There's a lot of support in the House of Representatives for this. It's time to do this. We need to ditch the rule. We need to make sure our waters are clean and safe, but we need to make sure to do it in a way that works with states and local governments to ensure this happens and isn't a federal land grab that is far beyond what any of us want and that is helpful. So now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Representative Blaine Lukenmeyer, for his comments. Blaine.
Thank you, Vicky. Get my papers here so they don't blow away. Oh, we may have problems. Okay. Well, thank you. And thank all of those folks who are here today. It's a great representation of a lot of folks who are interested in this issue. It's something that, quite frankly, affects every single American in this country, not just the folks who are represented here today. Everybody should have a concern about the EPA getting in their lives, regulating the water on their farm, in their business, or in the ditch in front of their home. That's how far and far-reaching this act could be. You know what happened back last year is the EPA, as Vicky indicated, tried to, or is in the process of proposing a new rule. And I believe that it's illegal from their actions, because I think if you read the Clean Water Act, and let me just read a portion of it for you to give you an idea of just how far out this issue is. Clean Water Act clearly says up front that it is a policy of Congress to recognize, preserve, and protect the primary responsibilities and rights of states to prevent, reduce, and eliminate pollution, to plan the development and use, including restoration, preservation, and enhancement of land and water resources, and to consult with the EPA administrator in exercise of this authority under this act. So basically, the Clean Water Act does not give the EPA the authority, and there have been 2 court cases since that indicate that the EPA does not have the authority to regulate this. Instead, they are going out on their own, believing that they have the ability to do this, and in my judgment, it's an illegal act from 2 reasons. Number one, as I just indicated, the act doesn't give them the authority to do this, number one. And number two, there's a process in place. It gets a little in the weeds here, but process is important from the standpoint of how they go about proposing rules. They didn't allow the proposal of this rule with the input of the public, with the input of the different associations and groups that are going to be affected by this, and as a result, this was just something that bureaucratically just did as a fiat rather than as a worked-on rule that allowed everybody to have some input to come to some sort of a common agreement that this was something that everybody could live with or work with. So to me, there's 2 things wrong with this. And I think, as Congresswoman Hartzler indicated, the new bill that has been passed out of committee basically gives them 30 days to pull the rule, and then if they want to continue, they have to go through the regular process, the regular order of proposing a rule, which is to allow input from the local folks, the different groups associated, and the impact of what would happen, as well as all the different studies that go along with that. You know, the implications of this are tremendous from the standpoint of what it can do to our lives, how we're going to have to be impacted from getting permits to put fertilizer and insecticides, in fact, on your yards if they want to carry it that far. And people sort of poo-poo that and say, well, you know, Blaine, that's not really what's going on here. And I was in a committee not too long ago in our Small Business Committee, which I'm the vice chair. We had a hearing with the undersecretary, the number 2 person at EPA. And he was sitting there and said, well, we're not really going to regulate the water in your ditch and that kind of stuff. And I said, I've got a question for you, sir. I have a creek, a dry creek behind my house. It floods once a year when you have a 5-inch rain, like we had this last weekend. I got a little trickle of water down it. I said, once a year it has water in it. Are you going to regulate that or not? And he kind of looked down a little bit and he said, well, if it's got a watermark, we can regulate it. Ladies and gentlemen, everything has got a watermark. All the puddles that you see here as a result of the rain over this last weekend, that could all be regulated. So they're telling you one thing, and in actuality, they're going to do something else. And if you judge the future by the past, as my dad always says, if you look at how the activist attorneys within the APA have been acting over the last several years here, especially with this administration, they're looking for ways to get into your life and take more power and control to themselves from you. And I think that's what we have to be wary of, and I think, you know, that's what this bill will hopefully do. We're excited about this opportunity to kind of curtail EPA's activities. It's a bipartisan effort, by the way. There's a lot of support on both sides of the aisle for this. We do have a prohibition in the new budget that's going to be effective in September or end of September this year. But in the meantime, we've got a partial prohibition against it. But we need a permanent solution. And that's what this bill does. It puts in place a permanent solution to stop the nonsense and the overreach of EPA. So with that, let me turn it back to Derek, you next in line, and have him give us his take on all this.
On behalf of the Missouri Soybean Association and all its members, I'd like to thank both Representative Hartzler and Representative Luetkemeyer for their close attention and their steadfast engagement on an issue that has become, from our members' standpoint, an unimaginable overreach of EPA and federal jurisdiction into the lives and the property owners of Missouri rural landowners, farmers, and businesses. As we all know, agriculture is proudly Missouri's leading industry, but private farmland also represents nearly 65% of the state's land base. So it's quite an understatement to say that a broad expansion of federal jurisdiction onto this land is an important issue for Missouri farmers. The fact is, Missouri farmers care deeply about our natural resources. They understand their livelihoods as well as their future generations' livelihood depends on them taking prudent care of their water and of their land. However, simply expanding government control and intrusion into our private property is not the right path and will not produce the results that EPA seeks. In fact, the EPA rule is much more about exercising new federal control than it is about protecting our nation's water. By way of this proposed legislation that was just mentioned, we are pleased to see that Representative Hartzler and Representative Luetkemeyer, as well as many other members of Congress, are reasserting its oversight and policymaking role into this important issue. We support the legislation's goal of withdrawing the current rule and starting over with more fully integrating a state and local consultation process into the rule. But as farmers, we also want to reinforce the principle and the desire that the final rule must not expand federal government overreach beyond Congress's original intent, something that we believe the EPA and the Corps has slowly but surely expanded over time on its own via agency policy and its own discretion. EPA continues to downplay the impacts of their rule. They continue to make clarifying statements. However, it's the fine written details in the regulation that will ultimately decide its fate, not the talking points or the day-to-day conversations of EPA officials that we hear on television and in the news. That's why our organization believes it's so important to get the details of the rule right the first time, and we're glad to see Representative Hartzler and Luetkemeyer take a strong stance on this issue. I think I'm to turn it over next to Steve Taylor with MOAG.
We support this legislation, and specifically support how it reaffirms the rights and authority of states by not only on the Clean Water Act, but the U.S. Constitution gives this authority to the states. Like I said, I'm going to go off the cuff, and I might get a little risky here because I'm going to get a little political. And as a trade association, I actually had a friend of mine in a trade association say, you know, in politics, you support all your friends. So I'm going to wade out in this water, and you know, pun intended. But so we got this came out of committee, I believe, with 2 votes from the Democrats. We had 2 Democratic votes, which was actually surprising to me to see. I thought we'd have more support from that, given how much support is in various states. But that's what we had. Now, over on the Senate side, they're working on a budget resolution to work on this, and they actually picked up 5 Democratic senators. And I have to mention one of the 5 was our Senator Claire McCaskill from Missouri. So, you know, credit due. We appreciate her support on this issue. I do hope that she's successful in getting some of her Democrat friends to come and support this as well, because we're facing a presidential veto on these actions, and it's got to be veto-proof for stuff to move forward, because the president's already promised a veto on it. So. The other thing I want to say, really, in Missouri, it's kind of become a bipartisan issue, because it was last fall that Governor Nixon actually wrote a letter to EPA and the Corps expressing concerns on this, and it's the same concerns that it's in this legislation. The governor wrote a letter saying, EPA, the Corps, you're overstepping your bounds here. You should not be taking away what's already meant for the states. And the governor in his letter pointed out a process that we use to enter in Missouri to classify our waters, and he said this is an example of how the EPA and the Corps should do it. I agree with that. I was actually part of that process. It was a painful process, but it was a successful and productive process, and that's what the EPA and the Corps should learn from it, and that's what they should do. One final thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker, but I've got some family here today, and my dad, my mom, and daughter's over there, and Dad's the guy with the MOAG hat on. Dad, I appreciate that. But you're standing in Callaway County right now, and I'm from Callaway County. Just a few miles down from here is the family farms, farm corn, soybeans, and cattle. And, you know, I remember, I don't know, you might be surprised that I remember this, but back in the 70s, Mom and Dad won the Conservationists of the Year award from our local Soil and Water County district. And Mom and Dad, they back in the 70s, mow-board plowing was a common thing. They changed over to minimum till. They did waterways, and they did impoundments and improved the water quality, and did that working with county governments using parks and soil sales tax money. And that's how it's done. We don't need EPA to come in here and really kind of mess things up with all the regulation and litigations. It's best left to the states and the locals, and I think I probably exceeded my time, so I'll turn it over to the next speaker, and I believe Harry Thompson from Missouri Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Steve. Like I said, I'm Harry Thompson from Missouri Farm Bureau. I'm a local farmer here. I farm in Cole and Callaway County, and I'd like to thank, on behalf of Missouri Farm Bureau, Congressman Hartzler and Congressman Luetkemeyer for their support in this issue, and for having this event here today to help bring it to light to the general public. The EPA is definitely overstepping their bounds, and we need less regulation from the U.S. government and more common sense. And I think the bill that they've got presented will help ensure that common sense prevails. Like everybody's been talking a little bit about the rain that we've had recently and the water spots that we've had. It just goes to show that if this regulation is interpreted as it could be, and knowing trial lawyers and how it could be handled in court, we have every belief that eventually it would be. Very little private land wouldn't fall under regulations of some type. And unless you live in a concrete jungle and don't have any concern about where your food comes from, this is an issue that should concern everyone. Whether it's your backyard or the food that you eat or where you want to play and recreate out in the country. So at this time, I'd like to thank everybody for coming and turn it over to Shane Keene with Missouri Corn Growers.
Thank you. I want to thank all the groups that are here today. I think the previous speakers and the vast array of groups are here that did a very good job summarizing the many issues that we see with this rule that's coming out. I want to say from our perspective, in Missouri we're very fortunate. Very few members of Congress know firsthand what it's like to deal with adversity in agriculture on a daily basis and have that experience firsthand. But in Missouri, we're fortunate. Congressman Luke Temeyer and Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler, they both know firsthand from their own experience the adversity that you face in agriculture every day on the farm level. And because of that, they understand the issues with this rule, and they understand that it's completely unacceptable to increase that adversity via federal rules from the EPA and other sources. So we thank them for taking a strong lead on this issue, whether it's weather, whether it's markets. We can't control those issues, but one thing we can do is become active on sticking up for ourselves, sticking up for the farmers in the state of Missouri, and they're doing that strongly, and we greatly appreciate their efforts there. And I'll turn it back over to Congresswoman Hartzler.
Thank you, Shane, and I want to thank, first of all, again, all of the groups who came and took time out of their schedule to be here. And I think this very strong support showing not only of people here who have spoken and standing behind me, but as well as people here in the crowd, show just how interested people in Missouri are about this and how very, very concerned we are with the federal government's overreach into our daily lives, and certainly by trying to have this huge power grab and having jurisdiction over the basic land, whether it be our backyard, ditches, depressions on our farm, anything that's going to hurt us. So I want to thank you for coming and let you know that we're going to continue in Washington, D.C., Blaine and I and our colleagues, to do everything we can to get this passed. It's imperative that we get the EPA and the Corps to rescind this rule, that we go back to the drawing board, and that we restore common sense and the true partnership between federal government, state government, and local government to make sure our waters stay clean. So thank you all for coming, and we look forward to visiting with you and working with you over the coming year to get this passed. Thank you.